and trying to identify areas of action for the future, after stating some facts and new developments so far, and some of the challenges that we need to deal with. So first of all, it seems that the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda is starting to have life, and in some countries, it don't exist until you have an acronym. So in the prepared notes, we shared SAA 2030, and when I was trying to Google that, it's not really widespread yet. But SAA, the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda, perhaps you can add another A or something for the future. But life by acronyms sometimes is meaningless. So we need still to go with what we mean when we talk about the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda, especially that it had many questions behind its existence and had the opportunity to spell out the opportunities for partners from the private sector, for civil society, for municipalities about the different areas of work, water management, food systems, agriculture, resilient cities and the infrastructure, and the various other activities. And we have as well the good arrival of the attention to be given to health. I would say in this dynamic world, there are two important additions to the work going forward. And one, thanks to the leadership of Razan and her team and her understanding of the links between adaptation, nature, and biodiversity, that will really give new dimensions for work in the future. The other arrival that was announced on the first day of the COP, and that perhaps Ambassador must mention that we had a very successful beginning of this COP, is the announcement of the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund. Some people are focusing on it for good and right reasons as possible funding for those who are being impacted negatively because of the fact that the two major lines of defense for attack against climate change mitigation and adaptation had been compromised. But I'm seeing it in different dynamics when we are realizing more and more the kinds of losses and damages incurred because of the fact that we're not doing what we should be doing in cutting emissions and doing more in adaptation. The matters are going to be reversed in reminding us that we need to do better. So perhaps this new dynamics need to be taken more into consideration, and it will have its own way of dealing with in the future. Having said that, I was in a meeting yesterday and earlier today. Yesterday, it was mainly with the African heads of state and industrialization. And I was happy that when President Ruto and others took the floor, they started to list projects. And for the first time, it's not just areas of investments in decarbonization and renewables took the priority, but I was happy to see issues related to the nexus in water, food systems, and agriculture work, in addition to affordable energy, had been in the focus. The other thing, that as we see opportunities through technology in cutting the costs when it comes to generation of electricity from the renewables and new alternatives, we are starting to see as well the impact of technology, including in desalination. And I've seen an interesting competition between entrepreneurs and pioneers from Singapore to companies and enterprises and entities based in the UAE and Saudi Arabia who has the best affordable technology, and with the competition on employing more investments in R&D for availing water, which is the essence behind life. Having said that, a report that is a bit alarming on the state of adaptation finance that came out the day before yesterday, jointly from the Center for the Global Center for Adaptation based in Holland, and with the CPI, stating us good news that climate finance had doubled, comparing 21-22 to 2019-2020. Bad news is that share of climate finance for adaptation had declined globally from 7% to 5%. So it seemed that the acceleration had happened more, obviously, in the energy side of the story and in the renewables. Nothing wrong with that. But what we need, if we need to triple the investments in renewables, the minimum is doubling, but Ambassador Nasr would remind us that perhaps quadrupling could be more relevant to many regions. Then my final point is basically if you focus on Africa and low-income countries here, the report by Nick Stern and Vera Songwi are putting some sort of aggregate figures on how much should be spent. But the assumption that the bulk of finance will be coming from domestic resource mobilization generally, 1.4 against 1 trillion of external finance. And 1.4, it's assumed that it's going to be majorly responsible for funding adaptation. I can tell you that this model, nothing wrong with Nick and Vera and their team, we're part of that, we're supporting their work. But basically it has a particular assumption. Some of them are generous in some countries that they will put the house in order, that debt service is going to be dealt with, that you will not be seeing a country like Zambia struggling with its debt, celebrating a deal with China after waiting for 3 years in Paris in June, and then a couple of weeks ago saying, well, bad luck, the initiative is not working. So this kind of dynamic in managing the funds and prioritizing the funding opportunities is not really helpful when it comes to the operationalization of the recommendation of Vera's and Nick report. So we need to deal with that. The other thing, the $1 trillion coming from outside, the 300 billion of the MDBs, if they are going to continue with their unfair distribution of funds, 15 to 20% adaptation and the rest on the mitigation, if bilateral finance is ignoring the adaptation opportunities, if the private sector continues, even with some incentives, the $500 billion assumed, going to focus on the renewables, are not going to be seeing what we need really to have of opportunities. Our solution is simple. Please look at the assets to flows project. Now we started to get decent attention and opportunities with incentives to some of the good solutions, especially in food systems, water management, and resilient infrastructure. The rest of the sectors with their leaders, and I'm happy that this great steering committee has the members of who is in the field, can really make sure that whatever we are presenting of projects, they have what it takes in terms of incentives, regulatory structure, and the support of the ecosystem for them to be more feasible going forward. Having said that, it's very important initiative. The acronym will be more known in the future when we talk about it. But meanwhile, great work is still waiting for your leadership. Thank you.